It's time we talked about domestic violence and how it's affecting our lives. The cost is much too high. Let's stop it from destroying our lives. Adversary to ally. Adversary to ally.
How many mothers will cry? How many children will die?
Come on, heed the call quick. But you got to do more than talk. You got to listen.
And like the introduction says, you've got to do more than talk about it. You've got to listen. Hello, folks. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Adversary to Ally. And this is a joint partnership between Real Talk, Real People and Karina Martin, the founder of Mothers of Victims Equality. And it is a show that we're going to bring to you every third Monday of the month. And the conversation will always be about domestic violence and intimate relationship violence. And we know that these aren't very popular topics, but when you consider that in the small state of Connecticut, last year, more than 40,000 people sought help from violent partners, then it really is time that we try and do something about this and come up with some kind of solution. But in doing our research, we found out that there weren't really many options open to men for them to talk about this. So we decided that we wanted to do something about this. Basically, because I grew up in a domestic violence situation and it really developed some unhealthy long-term effects. For Karina, her daughters Shakwanika Brody, Alicia Wiley, as well as her granddaughter Majaya Richardson, were all murdered by violent partners. So this is definitely something that we really, really should talk about. And that is our goal, to get men to talk about it and see if we as men can help come up with solutions that might help some of these men turn from adversary to ally. My first guest today is Ashan Event. He is a professor at Eastern Connecticut State University, and he's also the owner of Main Event Sports and Apparel, and he joins us now. What made you interested in talking about domestic violence and intimate relationship violence? And I know Karina Martin recently had an affair there. It's her annual event to call attention to intimate relationship violence. Is that how you got involved here?
Yeah, that's how I got involved through Karina and their family with Alicia Wiley and their event on campus to help spread domestic violence and the message of domestic violence amongst college students. Because she was tragically killed during the relationship from that, and um, knowing the importance of having healthy relationships. I thought it'd be great for me as a man to be a part of that, because usually it's just something that women are a part of and men don't speak about it. But I just thought it'd be cool to be a part of that and start helping the movement.
Well, it was one of the things that Karina and I talked about was the fact that men are largely the perpetrators of domestic violence and intimate relationships.
Absolutely.
But there is no real, I know that some of these programs out here incorporate men where they talk about gang violence and so forth, but there's no real program. And I just lost you again.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here. Can you see me?
You're kind of
perfect. There we go.
playing. Okay, you kind of.
There we go. Can you
Yeah,
see me
there
or
you
no?
go. Okay,
Okay. Better?
right. That's much better. So
Okay.
for us, there just didn't seem to be any outlets for just men to talk about domestic violence, their thoughts on it, and what they're seeing out there amongst other men. I myself, when I talk to some men just randomly, they don't really, some have a major problem with it and some don't. They say they do, but their attitude is that they really don't. Why do you think that is?
Um, some men are affected by it, and sometimes it bothers, men to be vulnerable and transparent about something, or it could be as well too. It affected them in their family somehow, some way, or they've had an encounter where they've probably had um, a domestic violence situation happen with them, themselves. So, I think it's more of a personal thing. If it affects you, then you care about it. And if you're one of maybe the perpetrators or got involved in the situation, then it doesn't really, you don't really want to talk about it, and it's not something that you're proud of or that you want to deal with.
And I find that really strange. And I'm not big on statistics at all because
Right.
statistics
Yep.
are numbers, but they don't tell the horror. But
Yeah.
I have to say that I've been reading, according to the um, Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, since the pandemic, domestic violence and intimate relationship violence has increased more than 70%.
Yeah.
40,000 calls went to the Connecticut hotline last year in calls for help from women. And shelters are 100% filled with domestic violence shelters are 100% filled, and 50% of the overload are being housed in hotels and in motels. That really is a troubling statistic. Those are some troubling statistics, and it really says a lot. Where do you think the problem lies that it gets to the point where men are, and some women for that matter, are beating up on their spouses?
Yeah, I think it it stems from like not having healthy communication or being in a healthy relationship. There could be, some red flags early on that you ignore, or not knowing how to resolve, situations, by using your words or learning how to walk away or just coping skills sometimes, is that sometimes people lack thereof, some men do, right? It's not something that we're always taught, from a young age, even playing with toys and GI Joes, we just
Right.
grasp them together and we don't really talk out our issues. We just kind of, go with our first instinct, which is aggression at times, right? And, it's been like that from birth. Don't let, if someone hits you, you hit them back. Or if if, you just don't let nobody punk you sometimes. Sometimes those things get embedded in your mind. You don't realize that. And sometimes you can't make the separation between the two. So, it can come out in your relationship, by you having an unhealthy healthy communication, can lead to aggression, and then aggression can lead to random acts of physical, shoving, and then shoving leads to something else. So I think that there's stages of it, um, of domestic violence, and sometimes what we think is okay might not be okay. Sometimes what we think is okay is really not okay. Sometimes we're not really sure there's different levels of domestic violence. And sometimes what might be acceptable 20 years ago is not even acceptable now, right? Or sometimes we don't even know what domestic violence is. What's the definition of that? Is it grabbing somebody, smacking somebody, pushing somebody, or could it be a verbal altercation? Is that domestic violence? So those things, um, sometimes men might not be fully aware of that, and it can put them in uncompromising situations.
Yeah, I know that when I was growing up, and I'm really big on domestic violence because that was my childhood. That is how I grew up. And how important do you think it is that community and other men get involved? I know when I was growing up, it was mind your own business. You literally heard women screaming, kids being beat, but it was mind your own business. I don't think that is as prevalent as it was then, but it's still largely a mind your own business. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people stand by and allow that to happen without some type of intervention, whether that is contacting authorities or something else?
I think it's more like a cultural conditioning that we're not taught to speak up. I think there's something that goes back to times where, in slavery, where we were just told to just shut up and just stay by and watch, as other people beat us and raped us and things like that. So I think it could be conditioned, and passed down from generations that was acceptable at times, because this is what we saw and they just thought it was just normal behavior. and it just, mind your business. It's something that is like a code of the streets. We don't come from sometimes see something, say something. That's not always, how in the minority community per se is not how you always see things. Even if you see a crime, sometimes you've been ridiculed for saying something to the police or to the authorities. You get labeled as a snitch or something to that effect. So with that, those are behaviors and things that we've had to deal with for so long that I think affects us overall as just individuals, as to say, there's nothing to see here, keep going, mind your business. I just think that's a part of our culture and how we were raised, and domestic violence was something that my mom experienced. She was in a domestic violence shelter and had to relocate from New Haven to Hartford, herself because of that, and sometimes, the influence of drugs and alcohol, have men acting in different ways that they probably normally wouldn't have, not being under the influence. So there's multiple different factors that bring that into play. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. So then I'm wondering how much of the absence of the father in the home in some Black homes, how big a role that plays, because a lot of these men are growing up not understanding the back and forth between men and women, and they have to kind of figure this out on their own. And let's face it, some of these men growing up are very angry about their circumstances, and I'm wondering if that plays a role in their relationships with their intimate partners.
I definitely think it does because if they're not teaching you, who's teaching you, right? Where you getting your principles from? Chances are you're going to learn from, big brother in the street or somebody who is, not that doesn't have the same moral or values, that we all share, so that's really the key is, if the dad's not in the home, how are you really learning anything? Where are you getting this information from to say it's okay, or how are you dealing with coping skills, right? And that's, or do you even know what a healthy relationship looks like? Some people don't know what a healthy relationship looks like, so they're not really sure how to deal with things, and they get into these relationships that make it a little bit tough, for them to, make it through without having these situations or these flare-ups, I should say. I think dads play a major part in the young man's development in their lives. Without that, they become lost, or they turn to the streets, or they turn to a gang, or they turn to this other family. And I'm not talking about like another family. I'm talking about other families outside of family.
Right.
These street families or these clubs or these organizations that sometimes don't always have the best model for behavior.
Yes, I've noticed that in talking with some guys about this, and I asked them, "What do your friends think about this?" And they're like, well, as far as they're concerned, she's out of line, she's not in her place, and
Yeah,
that is a disturbing. There's something disturbing about that when you say she's not in her place. What do you mean? I and I've noticed that this is a thing that women are still, in some men's eyes, considered not an equal, not a partner, but like a something or a person that's just provided to you to do your wishes, or and
yeah,
what you want to do.
yeah. And it's tough because some people see women as a piece of property, right? As if they own them and that um, they can do whatever they want to them, and it's true. There is people who feel like women are not equal to, that they're beneath them, and this is the reason why we have the type of movements that we have, the Me Too movement, and I am somebody too, and diversity and inclusion, for women to make them feel like they are whole. So it is tough because it is a cultural thing, not only just in our culture, but society as well.
In society.
Has said that, that says that, women are not equal or they don't have the same right as men do or as other people do. So, it's a big deal society wise, let alone intercultural wise within certain pockets of communities or genres of people.
So what do you think, what would you like to see as some of the solutions? What do you think is lacking? And getting these men to turn the corner, so to speak? What do you think is lacking?
I think, some of the things are lacking are like resources for men to have an outlet to talk, right? There's not many men's groups that you can go to, or there's not many activities where men are being transparent and vulnerable about the struggles that they're having, whether it be mental health, whether it be, narcotics or just anger. Anger management, is key. Some of us have triggers from childhood that if someone does something to you, you automatically just go into that mode and there's no coming back from that sometimes. So, learning how to have healthy boundaries and healthy relationships with other men is a solution, but where at least, besides having like maybe like a men's church group, maybe there could be some other fatherhood initiatives, that people can put together where, there could be a men's conference or a men's day or things like that where, someone standing up saying, hey, you know what? I want to do this and I want to be a part of this. So those are some of the things that are are the solutions that I think can help, in these situations. I don't think that a lot of people know where to find resources for men to have help, except for when you get in trouble where
Right.
you have to do counseling or things like that. And after that, it's more of a reactive, not necessarily a proactive thing, that men identify with. And then also having therapists, readily available that understand Black men, that understand men in general, right? And therapy and counseling. Those services should be more available now to men because of the things that we're doing, or that is growing with domestic violence. Those are some of the solutions. Those are the things that help me develop is being a part of a different men's group and going to men's retreats and going to counseling and therapy to help me become whole and realize that I do have some shortcomings and that I do want to be made whole and and I have to identify that. So some of it is soul searching as well too, saying that hey, I know I no longer want to be the same person I am. I want to make changes in my life, and some of that just comes with just attitude and being around different people that can provide perspective
Mhm.
and give you that insight or that wisdom.
Well, Black men, and I'm only speaking about Black men now. I'm sure it's true for
Yep.
a lot of
Yep.
people. But I'm talking about Black men. And I think because of where many of us grow up and how we grow up, we have to be aggressive. I mean, that's kind of like, if you're not aggressive or if you appear to be a bit passive, then let's just say that things don't go your way too well. Do you think that has anything to do with this aggressive approach to women?
Absolutely. It has to do with their approach because this is what we're taught. This was embedded in our brains. It's hard to, tell someone, to their whole life, hit back if you need to, or don't let nobody punk you, or they can't talk to you like that. Subliminally, I think it does something to your conscious and your mind where you can't turn the switch off sometimes. It's just sometimes it's like that with football players, right? They've been taught to be, to play a vicious sport, and to when the whistle blows, go all in and go everything and be aggressive, and then some things happen and they're still aggressive, right? And not saying that football players or any other athlete that's subject to non-domestic violence. I'm just saying in general, their behavior has been taught to
Right.
be aggressive. So you see more aggression in football players and domestic violence, I think, than some other different sports. I don't see that in necessarily baseball
Soccer.
or soccer, right? It's not in reality. It's not the same. So, I would say that this is an acquired behavior that you've been taught, and sometimes it's hard to shake it. And if you don't really know, your natural instinct is to react. And you don't really realize it until the damages are done. Like, oh my gosh, I don't, I wish I could take that back. And I'm sure anybody does, right? Um, but without those coping skills or those mechanisms to realize you can't go from 0 to 100, then it's always going to be a problem, for some people.
and and to develop those coping skills, you have to admit that you have a problem.
Yes,
Number one, you have to admit that
absolutely.
you have the problem.
Yep.
You have to admit that you have to kind of let your guard down, and
Absolutely.
your pride as what you
Yeah.
perceive to be a masculine behavior. And you have to
Yeah.
just accept the fact that it's all right to be, it's all right to feel. It's
Yeah.
all
It's
right to
okay
feel
to
love.
it's okay to feel vulnerable.
Yeah,
That's the key that we're missing. You know, you got to give in somewhere. You know, you can't keep the wall up all the time. The wall has to come crashing down at some point in order for you to be better. And that's part of, us as men. We don't let things go. We hold on to it. We let it build up, or we suppress it, and we don't realize it's there. Because you have to deal with things on your job. You got to deal with things, with family. You got to deal with things, in different avenues, and it just starts to peel up, and then it just explodes out at one time, and then now here we are.
yeah, and we are really at, I think, a very difficult point, because I don't think there is a day that goes by that domestic violence isn't leading the newscast of some woman getting beaten,
Yeah,
some child being murdered, shot at. I mean, I find this incredible that you could be so mad and so angry that you
yeah,
shoot in the direction of your child.
yeah,
That's a whole lot of anger,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that is uncontrollable anger. So I guess to wrap this all up, and I know you've talked about therapy and counseling and so forth. How do we get them to do it? How do we get these men to go into counseling, to go into therapy? How do we get them to let that guard down and just understand they're just men? Things happen, and you have to take care of it.
yeah. I think making it the norm, and making it a conversation all the time and speaking up, saying, "Hey, man, that's not okay." I think that's what it's going to take for each one of us to step out of our comfort zone. When we see something, we got to say something, and we got to lift each other up. And now, mental health is more prevalent, more evident than we've ever seen before.
Yes.
And and identifying that sometimes isn't the key, and other people, and checking on people to say, "Hey, man, are you okay? You seem to be going through a lot, man. Maybe you should talk to somebody." So I think, starting a conversation with people to address some of the natural issues that we have, because you got to get it at the root. It's not that people are just aggressive, because it's the root cause of that, and if you see that, then it's up to us to start to talk about that and have the courage to ask, "Man, are you okay? Is everything gonna be all right?" Because it's necessary now, for us to do that. No more suffering in silence. It's not okay to do that now, and I think making it a conversation in the norm, having podcasts like this, and having conferences, and putting it in the forefront, and stop putting it on the back burner, because no one deserves to die because of this, or be injured, or have to fear for their lives because we're not talking about it and we keep sweeping it under the rug. I think that we need to peel the rug back and really talk about it. And those who have gone through it, using their experiences to help other people out. I think that's the key.
Sounds good to me, man. I couldn't have said it any better. Anything you want to
Yeah.
add? I think you've said it all.
No,
Anything?
yeah, no, yeah, I think we wrapped it up. I mean, it was great, and I'm glad that I was able to participate and, using my own experiences in life, and growing as a man, and just opening up, say, hey, we all fall short somewhere, but it's okay to turn it around, and we can do better, and no one else should have to, be injured, or another family member that doesn't need to lose their life, because it's okay to speak up and talk to somebody. I think that's the key.